Welcome to another CEO Wisdom Pod. We have Soban Raza with us. He is the Chief Executive Officer at Antematter in Islamabad, Pakistan. He's basically building maximum performance blockchain and AI solutions. I would guess mostly for tech startups. We're going to talk about generative AI, entrepreneurship, blockchain, everything in between today. This pod is presented to you by podper.com if you want to start or scale a podcast. So Ben, welcome to the pod. Tell me a bit more about yourself and what you're up to nowadays.
Thank you, Charles. Thank you for the warm introduction. I'll start with antimatter and what antimatter is, and then I'll start with a little bit of introduction about myself. So, as you explained, Antimatter is an IT firm. It's a technology solutions firm that's working across two technology verticals. One is blockchain, Web3, the Web3 world, and the other one is generative AI. And we are venture backed. We are backed by, in fact, two venture capital funds, one based in the US in Dallas, Texas, one based in Karachi, Pakistan. We are also top leaders in the ecosystem in both Web3 and AI, with our content having more than millions of impressions on LinkedIn as well as our blog. Now, as far as myself, as I'm working full time at Antimatter right now, trying to grow this baby from right now we are about 50 headcount, and we basically grew about 500% in terms of revenue. So I'm trying to take this forward, hopefully this year, to around 5 million in ARR and double the headcount.
Who do you target as your ICP and how do you get in touch with them?
Sure. So as you mentioned, I think right now we are mostly working with tech startups, which are working or experimenting with either generative AI or Web3. But as we are sort of growing, we are understanding that the real impact, the real change, the real, you can say, fascination of ours would actually be more, which would actually be bigger engagements, would be more long-term engagements with scale in both of these technologies. So we are now shifting our ICP slightly to the lower middle market, with companies doing about 25 mil to 100 million revenue in annualized revenue, and we're trying to pitch our services or solutions to them. In terms of geography, we are mostly fixated on the United States, but also working with some companies in the Middle East.
So before that, you were a software engineer. How did the idea to start this business came about?
Yeah, I've often talked about this. The reason for starting Antimatter was purely the lack of stimulation that you get in the industry, that you have to struggle with in the industry. When you're really good academically, you're really inclined towards engineering, you're experimenting with all this stuff, but you're still not getting to that real world impact. And then once you enter the industry, you're still not getting that because there's that corporate ladder to climb if you're going corporate. If you're not going corporate, um, the ecosystem here where I am operating is not as mature or as developed in terms of technology. So what we did was looked around us. We found really good talent that can tackle problems that are only confined to the Silicon Valley, for example. And so what we want to do is, since we can feel that the talent around us is present, just needs to be nurtured, we want to bring those hard core deep tech problems from the Silicon Valley to our geography and sort of tackle that. So that was the primary motivation behind starting Antimatter.
Right. And then 5 million ARR as a Pakistan company that started a couple of years ago seems quite steep. Like, what's your plan to reach that growth?
Sure. Yeah. The number one thing that's helped us get about 500% revenue increase in the past year has been partnerships. So we formed strategic partnerships with partners in the United States who are not only helping us in terms of business development, but also in a bunch of other things that are needed in terms of enterprise readiness. For example, if you're going to be targeting the lower middle market, because you need to have a bunch of processes ready, you need to make sure that your crisis management is in place. So all of that stuff is being given to us in terms of signals from our partners. And that's why we're preparing ourselves to enter the lower middle market.
And what kind of partners are you aiming for? How do you get in touch with them? What's your full partnership strategy?
Our main thing in today's world if you're going to be running a consulting firm or a technology firm like ours, is going to be thought leadership. So what we are entirely focused on, in fact, the partnerships that we got so far were because of the thought leadership that we engage in on LinkedIn or on our own blog, the website blog we have. So we have these institutional insights about the industries that we're working with, about the technologies that you were working with, and we just pump content out there, quality content that nobody else is publishing. So people are obviously naturally attracted to that, and then some partners will be naturally attracted to that, and then you have a funnel, which sucks in those new visitors, and then build relationships from there. So thought leadership all the way.
What does your churn look like? Is it constant recurring revenue or is it project based and one time fee for one project?
No, so most of our engagements are configured as monthly revenue, so a monthly retainer, and the project, generally speaking, runs for about 6 months to a year. Um, but it can run longer. It depends on what kind of ICP you locked, right? So if it's a tech startup, the probability that it'll run for more than a year is very low. But if it's an enterprise, we are working with an enterprise, by the way, which is well funded, then in that case, you're looking at multi-year engagements, right? So it depends on where on the spectrum you're getting or sourcing clients from.
Right. Web3, what's new in Web3 this year and why is Web3 still relevant?
Very important question. I think Web3 is relevant because of the I'm going to sound like I'm selling promises or pipe dreams, but in reality, just after looking at how the economy operates, there is immense need for the original promises that Web3 brought to the table in the financial industry, first and foremost. It's not transparent, it's very opaque. Number one. Number two, because of us being exposed to the finance industry, just face first, we've realized the amount of inefficiencies that are involved, for example, with the amount of intermediaries being involved in a financial transaction. Now, these are use cases that Web3 can solve in a heartbeat because of the infrastructure, the technology layer that it provides for two parties to connect with each other without the need for any intermediaries or without the need to establish any trust because there is cryptography involved. So two parties can directly connect, which means faster transactions, more efficient transactions. So you start out with the finance and with the world of finance, but then all of a sudden you start seeing capital markets because a lot of the transactions are happening in the capital markets. So capital markets, finance, and then all of a sudden you're seeing applications in every branch of the economy. So really, wherever there is any transfer of value happening in real estate or in other industries, Web3 can be applicable there to increase and improve efficiency, to remove trust, and to give ownership of the data of the transaction to the end user without having some centralized third party come in and audit stuff or make sure everything's going good, and then us having to put our trust in them.
What about AI applications? What's been new on that level? What precise service do you
Mhm.
provide for your clients and where is the market heading?
Sure. Now, that's a very important question because it is one that we have had many discussions about. And in fact, we are seeing the market signals, um, you know, pushing back on the more traditional staff augmentation type of project development, which is more dev shop or body shop oriented. That is going to be absolutely destroyed by the generative AI boom that is happening because of the increase in productivity and the trend that I'm seeing is that AI is going to slowly and steadily take over the work of the more low level, the more commoditized work of a software engineer. It's going to take that over, and what that means in terms of the market, in terms of enterprises, is that the big CTOs were seated around big tables having discussions regarding strategy, have put up their hands and they're going to say, they've basically said, we're not going to be investing in X project or Y project until we have figured out the AI boom. Until we have figured out what AI means for us, how we can leverage AI for our own company, for our products, for our internal functions and processes. So the biggest thing is that spending towards the services industry at large is going to take a lot of hit. It's going to change. It's going to modify the forms of interaction between the consulting industries of technology and the enterprises, which are their clients, is going to get changed. Now, what are they looking at? What are the enterprise leaders looking at specifically? Productivity improvements is number one. So that's the easiest and quickest win to get. And what they're doing is they're understanding how we can orchestrate our own set of agents on our own set of data to make sure that what we are performing today, we're performing it 50% better tomorrow. So that's the number one goal that they have, which is more internally focused. And it is also one of the services that we provide at Antematter is that, hey, tell us what your processes look like. In fact, don't tell us. We're going to come in and audit and look at your processes. And then we're going to orchestrate a set of agents that are going to communicate with each other to make sure that a lot of the more commoditized or more raw or primordial work is taken away from your people. They just have to supervise it. So the human in the loop is still relevant, but it's less relevant than it was relevant, let's say, a year ago. And because of all of this agent orchestration, the productivity improvements you're going to see is going to give you a competitive advantage. It's a matter of operational excellence, which is mandatory for almost all enterprises, all businesses today.
Do you feel that being in Pakistan gives you an edge?
It gives us an edge, but there's also lots of downsides. So it's a game of pros and cons. The edge obviously is cost. Your cost is not as high as it would be if you were operating out of the United States. But what that essentially means is that you're going to have a lot of troubles as well because you're targeting a geography that you're not sitting in. And it's really hard to do business development that way if you're not in that country or in that geography, because maybe you do not understand the verbiage, the phraseology, how they conduct business in America or in the Middle East. So you have to understand that information somehow, which is why we are relying on partnerships, as I mentioned originally as well, because people are there, people on the ground who understand the market a lot better than we do, and because of that, they can help us figure it out. So, and there are other challenges as well. For example, the government regulations landscape is not as clear. There's not a lot of support from the government. Just the whole reputation of the country is also in question. So a bunch of challenges, but in terms of advantages, the biggest one I would see is cost, being something that you can play to your advantage. And then the second one is that, as I mentioned originally, there's just a lot of untapped talent, which if you can bring the sort of hardcore, more complex work to your country, all of that talent is untapped. You can grab that talent, nurture it, and then boom. And then people across the world are just dying to get hands on this kind of talent.
What are your top goals as a CEO for this year?
My top goals in terms of numbers, as I said, we want to hit 5 million in ARR this year. We also want to develop sharp, concrete offerings within both Web3 and generative AI, where we have sharp, concrete solutions or sharp, concrete problems, primarily for big engagements or primarily for the lower middle market or the enterprises. I also want to figure out the generative AI sort of boom in a correct manner that other companies that are maybe too much on the hype spectrum or maybe too much on the skepticism spectrum are not looking forward to. So if you can figure out the AI boom somehow, that's one of the biggest strategy goals that we have. Then the rest of it is also about thought leadership. So we want to become or transform into a true consultancy, that is going to provide the sort of thought leadership that is needed for businesses to remain competitive today. And so what we want to do on that end is make sure all of our engineers, all of our staff members are well-rounded, and they're pushing insights and content out there to help the broader business industry so that the whole branding of Antematter improves as a whole.
AI and the current LLM race who do you feel is going to get the upper hand as a company, and what would that mean for the market?
So it's very hard to predict any of that. I think it's just going to be bets that are going to be purely randomized. It could be OpenAI, could be Microsoft, could be Google. It depends on a lot of different factors. It depends not only on the sophistication of the model that's underlying, whatever service they're providing, but also on the user experience, also on some aspects of data privacy. So I would say it's very hard to say who's going to win, but it seems like OpenAI is pretty set in terms of the speed that they have, the amount of good stuff they're pushing out every quarter. Like they're surprising us. Look at Sora, look at ChatGPT, the evolution of ChatGPT. Look at all the different initiatives that they're putting out, and it's just crazy the speed that they're working at. So OpenAI is pretty set. It's definitely among the top three contenders for being the winners of this AGI race. But let's see.
And GPT-5, in your opinion, what would it look like if GPT-4 was sort of a genie in a bottle that could understand and fulfill every single of your B2B requests? What would GPT-5 look like?
Okay, so I think if unless and until there is a fundamental change to the model, just increasing the amount of data or the amount of parameters is not going to yield a lot of improvement. Now, if you take, for example, GPT-3 and GPT-4, the major GPT 3.5 and GPT-4, the major difference is not per se the output sophistication or the fidelity of it. It's more so the multimodality, right? And other features that were not present in GPT 3.5. So if GPT-5 continues on the same trajectory, it's not going to be a huge mind-boggling difference. But if there's a foundational difference, GPT-5 could be, as I said, taking over marketing, taking over sales, taking over engineering, the three prime business functions that are primed to be disrupted by generative AI.
Right. Well, thanks for today, Soban. Where can people find out more about you?
Sure, they can visit my website at antematter.io, ANTE matter.io. They can also search my name, Soban Raza, on LinkedIn. Pretty active, post daily there. Insights about Web3, insights about AI, post video content as well. So if they're interested, they can follow me there. Also have newsletters. If they visit the website, we have three newsletters: one for developers, one for executives or business leaders, and one is for one is just like general engineering stuff. But follow us on the newsletters as well, and you'll get to read a lot of the insights that we glean in our day-to-day operations.